Hello there. Um, this is, I'm sure anybody who's been my subscriber for a while instantly recognizes, or will instantly recognize the way I'm speaking right now, because I've done this before. Uh, I did it a couple months back in May or June, I think it might have been. Um, but I'm not doing the exact same thing, or switching back. I'm not becoming a creationist again, nor am I deconverting. There's very little chance of any of either of those things happening. The issue is that I've been having some discussions with people. I've encountered some arguments, uh, and at this moment, at this point in my life, I can no longer consider myself a Protestant and be honest with myself, honest about what is true, what we can see is true. I've been convinced that sola fide and sola scriptura are both wrong. Um, I've been convinced of baptismal regeneration, infant baptism, the real presence, uh, prayer through saints, all of these things. Um, and that's just that's just the way it is. That stuff appears to be true, and I'm going to accept that. Now, what I'm doing right now is trying to decide which of the two big one true churches I should go at, Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy. I'm leaning very strongly towards Roman Catholicism simply because uh, the ecclesiology seems to make more sense, and uh, Eastern Orthodox, their metaphysics is incoherent, completely incoherent from my perspective. So, I mean, I'm not going to make my final decision until I do one more thing, which I'm actually going to do in this video. Uh, but first, I want to say why the rationale behind this decision. It was in a discussion I had with Theologica 37, during which he took all of my. I had a list of criticisms of Catholicism that I went into that pre-planned discussion with. Um, and this was after I rejected sola fide and sola scriptura. I planned this discussion, and every single criticism of from the Protestant perspective of Roman Catholicism was completely destroyed to my satisfaction. I haven't had the opportunity to do this quite the same thing with Cabane and Eastern Orthodoxy. I haven't gotten to all of my questions with him, but I'll address that in a minute. The argument that he made that made me no longer a Protestant was I don't was basically this. Uh, when Jesus came down, he didn't come down to write a holy book that would be our absolute authority. And he did not, after ascension, send the Bible down on a rainbow. The Bible came about, the canon particularly came about later. What Jesus did do, on the other hand, was start a church. And I mean that there's no refutation of that argument, of that fact. It can't be disputed. And it's just, it demonstrates Protestantism to be false, and that's why I'm no longer a Protestant, and I can't be one. Now, as to which of the two churches to join, it's, as I've said, every single ignorant criticism I had of Catholicism was completely blown out of the water by it in that discussion with Theologica. I've been trying to get a similar discussion with Cabane set up to answer my questions. I've never been able to actually sit down with him and get through all of them, and that's actually the reason I'm making this video. Given that, I mean, this is a grave matter. This will affect the course of my life and depending on your theology, may even affect my eternal destiny. So this is really important, and that's why I'm going on the internet. Amazingness that it is. Now, basically, I wanted to do this with Cobain, have him go through my various questions for Eastern Orthodoxy, the reasons that I find it rather poor as a position, and the reasons that I'm leaning very strongly towards Catholicism. But unfortunately, he happens to be on vacation right now. So I figured I'll just ask them to whoever happens to see this video while I'm making a video. And these questions are, if these questions are answered to my satisfaction, then Eastern Orthodoxy will become a very strongly tenable position to me. If they aren't, then I am almost certainly going to become a Roman Catholic. Question number 1. Eastern Orthodox believe that the only thing that can contradict a bishop when he speaks to the local church is either another bishop or an ecumenical council. Now, let me ask you, how do you decide if a council is ecumenical in nature? It doesn't seem like there's any way to do so. Majority opinion doesn't work because the other way, which is another bishop to contradict him, well, that means a single bishop, if the council comes to a conclusion he doesn't like, can simply declare it unreliable, and it will become such. Or you could say that it's based on the doctrine it teaches, in which case ecumenical councils are really not very capable of teaching or of bringing anything new to the table. So they seem rather pointless. They can just say things that are already known, or say very small, innocuous facts. At best, they can take an issue that is dividing the church somewhat evenly and resolve it. But that's about the limits. The theological development is extremely slow, and the council becomes all but pointless. And that's also not how the Eastern Orthodox do it, which actually leads me to question number 2, which is, given that councils are the only thing that can contradict a bishop, other than another bishop, given that they're so important, why hasn't the Eastern Orthodox Church held one in over 1,000 years? It seems hopelessly illogical to me. It seems like you should hold. It seems like you should hold one maybe, I don't know, at least once every 100 years or so. If they're that important as they seem to be to the ecclesiology of the Eastern Orthodox Church, they should happen all the time. Next question. In Matthew, I believe it's chapter 16, 18 through 19, I could be wrong, Jesus declares that Peter is the rock on which he will found his church, and he actually changes Peter's name from Simon to Peter, which literally means rock. Now, the idea of a temporary rock is absurd in the highest degree. The idea that a rock's successors will be a very large pile of pebbles is absurd in the highest degree to me. It doesn't make any sense at all. So, how is it that Peter is crowned and named the rock, and yet there isn't a continuing people taking his role as the early single visible leader of the church? How is it that that role, which was given to Peter, has no succession to it, or is not truly taken up by the next generation, because that authority is passed equally onto multiple people? Next question. The Filioque was added to the creed about 200 years before the schism, and during that time, it wasn't particularly disputed. So, or it was accepted by the Eastern churches. So, I mean, why didn't the pure Eastern churches, uncorrupted by the evil Augustinian traditions, why didn't they instantly recognize this thing as evil and reject it? But instead, it was not. It was pre-schism. It was instituted, and there was no objection for about 200 years, I believe it is. Next question. Every time, even if it's a parable, every time that someone is ever sent by God to hell, God always says, even if it's a parable, a person representing God will say this: "Depart from me." I think it varies based on translation to translation, but it's always some variant of "go away from me." Now, how can this be reconciled with the Eastern Orthodox view of the afterlife, where not only is hell in the presence of God, but the presence of God is the hell itself? It's very squarely and plainly contradicting that idea. Next, where is the source of universality in Eastern Orthodoxy, given that it appears, to me at least, that the churches are not particularly more so in communion with each other than a random Baptist church and a random Methodist church, or maybe two random Southern Baptist churches. And actually, the ecclesiology of Eastern Orthodoxy reminds me of the Southern Baptists, because they believe that every church is local and that there's no authority higher than the local church, and that each church is responsible before God for what it teaches. Nonetheless, they do have the Southern Baptist Convention, so in that sense, they are in communion with each other in a certain way. I mean, where in Eastern Orthodoxy is the universality? It doesn't seem like a universal church at all. It doesn't. Final question. Let me get a prop. This is the Eastern Orthodox conception of God. You can see here God's essence, the three persons of the Trinity which commune with God's essence, an infinite gulf away from his energies, and all of this is somehow all the same God. Does this make any sense whatsoever? At all? I mean, it's like, I mean, it seems the metaphysics of Eastern Orthodoxy is just dreadful. Their concept of a complex God does not make any freaking sense at all. The concept of an ontological distinction between essence and energies and an infinite gulf between them makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, this is kind of an argument from personal incredulity. Nonetheless, it just doesn't make sense. So if someone could please answer those questions for me, that would be uh, really, really, really great. Uh, and if they are not answered to my satisfaction, I will probably join, or at least take the classes, and at the end of them, quite probably join the Roman Catholic Church. If they are answered to my satisfaction, I will do a significantly larger amount of study than I already have done, and that that'll be it. Um, this will also be very intriguing because it will answer the question once and for all: what happens when an intellectually honest young Earth creationist is exposed to the internet and the information therein? The answer: he becomes either a Roman Catholic or an Eastern Orthodox Christian inside of 1 year.